Okay, Shalom. We are live. I'm here with James, John, and Aaron. Sounds like it could be a band. We're going to be reading here from the Book of Ruth. This is chapter 1 of the Book of Ruth. I will go ahead and I'll read the first chapter. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges judged that there was a famine in the land, and a man went from Bethlehem of Judah to sojourn in the fields of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi, and his 2 sons' name were Mahlon and Chilon, Ephrathites from Bethlehem of Judah, and they came to the fields of Moab and remained there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. And they married Moabite women, one named Orpah, and the other named Ruth. And they dwelt there for about 10 years. And both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and the woman was left bereft of her 2 children and of her husband. Now she arose with her daughters-in-law and returned from the fields of Moab, for she had heard in the field of Moab that the Lord had remembered his people to give them bread. Then she went forth from the place where she had been, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the road to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each woman to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the deceased and with me. May the Lord grant you that you find rest, each woman in her husband's house. And she kissed them, and they raised their voices and wept. And they said to her, No, but we will return with you to your people. And Naomi said, Return, my daughters, why should you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they should be your husbands? Return, my daughters, go, for I have become too old to marry, that I should say that I have hope, even if I had a husband tonight, and even if I had borne sons. Would you wait for them until they grew up? Would you shut yourselves off for them and not marry? No, my daughters, for it is much more bitter for me than for you, for the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me. And they raised their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth cleaved to her. And she said, Lo, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her God. Return after your sister-in-law. And Ruth said, Do not entreat me to leave you, to return from following you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. So may the Lord do to me, and so may he continue, if anything but death separate me and you. And she saw that she was determined to go with her, so she stopped speaking to her. And they both went on until they arrived to Bethlehem. And it came to pass when they arrived to Bethlehem that the entire city was astir on their account. And they said, Is this Naomi? And she said to them, Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why then should you call me Naomi, seeing that the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has dealt harshly with me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the fields of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Thus concludes chapter 1. Welcome, Wade. Thank you for joining us. We just finished chapter 1. Anybody have any questions, comments, discussions, blueberry muffin recipes, anything?
I've got a wicked red pepper chipotle cream sauce, if you ever want that.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, it's not bad. Can we infer from this that perhaps Ruth had already cleaved to God? Or was he cleaving to God for her sake, for her love of Naomi, do you think? Or anybody, really?
I think probably the second. There's no real indication that she was cleaving to God beforehand.
Okay.
Anybody? John, I know you have something. No?
Come on, John.
I actually did when you started to hang out, and then I lost it. I apologize, actually.
Oh, don't apologize. Don't apologize. Hopefully you find it again here real soon.
I'm just looking through the Rashi actually here. So this takes place before King Saul.
Right. This is the period of what we call the Shoftim, the judges. This is after Joshua, but before Saul. This is when all the tribes were ruled by judges in the land of Israel.
And Elimelech would be a member of the tribe, no? He was a Ephraimite,
Yes.
descendant of Joseph.
Right. Correct.
So they would be only Hebrew through patrilineal descent. But that was that the term patrilineal? I don't even remember the term.
Who would be?
Naomi, Ophrah, and Ruth.
Where are you getting that from?
I'm sorry. It says that they were Ephraimites, and their husband, Naomi's husband, had died and left 2 sons,
Mm-hmm.
and they married Moabite women. One
Right.
Ophrah and one Ruth. So Ruth and Ophrah Moabites, but their husbands are Hebrew Israelites.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
Right.
So they wouldn't be considered part of the tribe. They would still have to. So I don't exactly know the break. So how does it exactly break down, tribal wise?
Well, these women aren't Israelites. They married Israelites, but they're not. They're from Moab. They're not Israelites. That's the whole point.
So they can so at this time theoretically you can renege your tribal I'm trying to break it down a little bit. They're leaving their Moabite identity. I don't really know how to rephrase it.
Right. Correct. In the Bronze Age, your national identity and your religious identity were all rolled up into one package. If you wanted to become Egyptian, you didn't just start acting like an Egyptian. You started worshiping Egyptian gods. If you wanted to become a Moabite, same thing. You had to adopt a country's gods.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
But do we know if her 2 sons married Moabites? They're from the tribe of Ephraim, correct?
Correct.
So do we know if their wives converted as well as Ruth?
We do not. We don't know.
There's no account of a conversion process or anything in Judah at the time or in Israel.
Right.
Wow.
Oh, so it's possible. I mean, so you could say that Elimelech's children aren't necessarily Jewish because who knows if even Joseph's wives converted and their children had a hexure. I mean, I guess we just
conversion was much more simplified in this period in time. It's not like it is today. It was basically, for men, it's you have to accept the Torah, you have to accept God, obviously, and the peoplehood associated with this covenant. Hence, in this very chapter, we see here. Excuse me. And Ruth said, "Do not entreat me to leave you, to return from following you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God."
Yeah, I think it goes without saying whether or not whether their wives did or whatever. It's clear that Ruth, on her own initiative, went that extra step.
Right.
You also see, I think, a broken person in Naomi. I mean, it's obvious, Mara. but she's very broken. I mean, who would to return? I mean, Torah says you never return a servant to their gods, and if you sell a maidservant, you certainly don't sell them back into, where they came from. Oh boy, here's Godzilla.
Didn't the Syrian community stop conversions because basically, or partially because the men were marrying non-Jewish women and just converting them?
Yeah, I mean that's that's one of the reasons why they cite. Um, it's not a particularly effective strategy in getting that particular problem to go away. It's actually much less of a problem to let the non-Jewish wife eventually convert. But you have to understand the Syrian community for many centuries was very isolated, very, very isolated. And then in the 1940s and 50s, a lot of them came here to Israel. And this is a very, compared to where they came from, this was a very secular society. And a lot of people, they were not particularly prepared for how secular it was going to be. And so a lot of Syrian Jews left here after leaving Syria. They left here and they settled in places like Buenos Aires or in New York City. There's a Syrian community in New York City. And this ban on accepting converts goes to the 1800s. It's not a new thing necessarily, but they reinforced it in New York City because a lot of young Syrian men were going out and marrying non-Jews. I shouldn't say a lot. Some were. A handful were. And so they reinforced this edict that not only do we not accept, we do not perform conversions in the Syrian community, we do not accept the conversions other people perform. I mean, you go to the Syrian synagogue in Brooklyn today, there's a big sign right up on the bima. We don't give aliyot to converts. We don't call converts up to the Torah. This is a practice that unfortunately they've chosen to adopt and to keep all these years. I don't agree with it at all. I think it's very, very, very problematic. In reality, they're just kind of shooting themselves in the foot on multiple different levels. And it's not particularly helpful in solving the problem of intermarriage at all. So.
Are Naomi or anyone in here, Oprah, Ruth, I guess Ruth in particular, are they considered prophetess of any kind?
Proselyte?
A proselyte, yeah, not a prophetess, no.
Prophetess, yeah, prophetess. Female prophet. They're not considered a female prophet. Okay. Because I find it interesting that they said that Naomi says, "For the Lord has dealt bitterly with me." This seemed like, did God tell her directly, or is she just referring to the fact that I guess she lost her husband and her family, and she was exiled?
Right, she lost her husband, fell on hard times.
Oh boy.
This could be a proof text to say that God deals with us in this lifetime, that it's not necessarily the afterlife that God punishes us.
Well, I wouldn't say it's one or the other. I would say it's both.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
Anything else on chapter 1? Do I have a volunteer to read for chapter 2?
I could read chapter 2. I don't have a problem with that. Let me go ahead and
Okay.
get to chapter 2, English. Okay, Chabad.org. Yeah, that's okay. Let's get going here. Now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a mighty man of valor, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, I will now go to the field, and I will glean among the ears of grain after someone whom I will please. And she said, Go, my daughter. And she went, and she came, and she gleaned in the fields after the reapers, and her chance was to come to the field that belonged to Boaz, who was the family of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, May the Lord be with you. And they said to him, The Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his servant who stood over the reapers, To whom does this maiden belong? And the servant in charge of the reapers answered and said, She is a Moabite woman, a maiden who returned with Naomi from the fields of Moab. And she said, I will now glean and gather from among the sheaves of the reapers. And she came and stood even from the morning until now, except when she sat a little in the house. And Boaz said to Ruth, Have you not heard, my daughter? Do not go to glean in the other field, neither shall you go away from here, and here you shall stay with my maidens. Your eyes shall be on the field that they reap, and you shall follow them. Here I have not ordered the youths not to touch you, and if you are thirsty, you may go to the vessels and drink from which the youths draw. And she fell on her face and prostrated herself to the ground, and she said to them, Why have I pleased you that you shall take I don't even know what that says. Cognizance of me, and you see that I'm a foreigner. I apologize. And Boaz replied to her, It is told to me that you did this for your mother-in-law after your husband's death, and she left you for your father and your mother of your native land, and they went to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward your deeds, and may your reward be full of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wing you shall take shelter, have come to take shelter. And she said, Let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have confronted me and have spoken to the heart of your handmaiden, but I am not as worthy as one of your handmaidens. And Boaz said to her at mealtime, Come here and partake of the bread, and dip your morsel in the vinegar. And she sat down and beside the reapers, and she handed her parched grain, and she ate and was sated and left over. And she rose to glean, and Boaz ordered his servant, saying, Let her glean from among the sheaves, and do not embarrass her. And also pretend to forget some of her bundles up for her, and leave that she may glean. Do not scold her. And she gleaned in the field until evening, and she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she carried it and came to the city, and her mother-in-law saw that she had gleaned, and she took of it out of and gave her that she had left over after being sated. Her mother-in-law said to her, Where have you gleaned today, and where have you worked? May he who took heed of you be blessed. So she told her mother-in-law from whom she had worked, and she said, The name of the man with whom I worked today was Boaz. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, Blessed is he of the Lord, who did not leave his kindness and with the living or the deceased. And Naomi said to her, This man is our kinsman, and he is one of our near kinsmen. And Ruth the Moabitess said, He also said to me that you shall stay with my youths until they are finished my entire harvest. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, It is good, my daughter, that you will go out with his maidens, so that they may not molest you in the field. And he stayed with Boaz's maidens to glean until the completion of the barley harvest. in the wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law. Oof.
Very good.
Very good read, yeah.
Okay. Anybody have anything for chapter 2?
I just picked up that they're in Bethlehem and they're talking about, wheat for bread and barley, and I thought that was interesting. I guess that was the first time I noticed that.
What exactly? If they're in Bethlehem?
Yeah, that they're harvesting wheat, and wheat makes bread, and Bethlehem means bread, right? Isn't that what it means? House of bread.
House of bread. Yeah, yeah.
And then bread, of course, is Torah, and they're coming to Torah. It's interesting. I just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
wordplay.
Bethlehem, house of bread. Yep. Yep. Anybody else have any insights, thoughts?
He seems like a nice guy, Boaz. I mean, he's telling his workers, leave the wheat there for her to take. Don't embarrass her. Let her sort of get her what she needs. It's like generosity. I find that I don't know how to put it.
They use here valor. That's a word we don't hear too much, and a mighty man of valor.
Yeah, an honest person, a person that's like looking after other people. I guess is supposed to be a judge. No, this is when the judges judge, so he would be considered. Would he be one of the judges that were ruling?
No. That's a different category of person altogether.
Okay, all right.
Samson was a judge.
Right on. Yeah. Samson. Yeah. Simpson.
Gideon, Ehud.
And they would be the same time period.
Yeah, same time period.
Wasn't Deborah a judge?
Yep. And she was what we call a Neviah, a female prophet. She's one of the very, very few.
Now, a ephah of barley, it says that she gleaned. That would be like a considered a handful.
Yeah, it's not much, yeah.
I'm just looking over it. I mean, it's a lot here. I mean, I guess we could talk about every verse until we're blue in the face. I mean, there's just what do you got for us, James? I know you probably had something good to chew on.
Honestly, I thought that Boaz was a judge all this time.
Yeah, that's why I had to clarify that. Yeah, because it seemed like just the way he's acting, the man of valor, he's a respectable person. I can't see it any other way of him other than him being a judge. Actually, it kind of like, it like sours me a little bit that how is he not a
Or Torah? Could we say
he's definitely a Torah observant.
He's never identified as a judge. Now, what we basically know about him is that he's a wealthy landowner somewhere in Bethlehem. He's like a pillar of the community, a man of the community who looks after people. But he's never called a judge.
And he doesn't do it for credit. It seems like he's telling these people like, yeah, let her scrounge for food and don't embarrass her. And he's doing this and tzedakah, charity.
he's setting everybody straight? He's like a Torah cop.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Really kind of called a judge. Yeah.
He's definitely something, that's for sure.
A mighty man of valor. I love that. Shall I read chapter 3?
If nobody has anything else about chapter 2. Chapter 2, last call. Anybody have anything?
I just wanted to know the significance of vinegar. Rashi doesn't really have any. I mean, Rashi comments because it was a heat wave. Well, I'm sorry, I don't understand the connection. Why would they be eating vinegar because of heat? Is that like a Middle Eastern thing, or?
Where? Which verse?
I'm looking in the Chabad. The Rashi is connected with each verse they have there. If you click show the commentary, it says for dipping in vinegar, let her dip her bread in vinegar. It says because it is beneficial in a heat wave.
It rehydrates things. It tastes like crap, but it's water is something you can't spare. You can't just something keeps you alive. You can't dip your bread in water to make your bread less crunchy and dry. So you dip it in vinegar.
And also, Naomi wanted to be called in chapter 1. Naomi says, "Don't refer to me as Naomi. Refer to me as Mara, because God has dealt bitter with me."
Right.
It's like a little connection here now. 2 chapters is a part about bitterness.
Yeah, you're definitely picking up on the patterns.
We're connecting the dots, huh, James? Rabbi? Rabbi.
Yeah, no, you don't have to call me Rabbi. Gav is fine.
Got 3, right? Chapter 3.
If no one else has anything for chapter 2, I guess not. James, hit it.
All right. As you wish. And Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek rest for you, that it be good for you? And now is not Boaz our kinsman? With those maidens you were, behold, he is winnowing the threshing floor of barley tonight. And ye shall bathe and anoint yourself, and put on your clothes, and go out to the threshing floor. Do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. And it shall be, when he lies down, that you shall know where he lie. And you shall come and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what you shall do." And she said to her, "All that you say to me, I will do." And she went down to the threshing floor, and she did all that her mother-in-law had charged her. And Boaz ate and drank, and his heart was merry, and he went to lie at the edge of the stack, and she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. And when it came time to pass at midnight, the man quaked and was taken around, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" And she said, "I am Ruth, your handmaid. And you shall spread your skirt over your handmaid, for you are a near kinsman." And he said, "May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. Your latest act of kindness is greater than the first, not to follow the young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. All that I say I will do for you, for the entire gate of my people. Know that you are a valiant woman. And now, indeed, I am a near kinsman, but there is a kinsman closer than I. Stay over tonight, and it will come to pass in the morning that if he redeem you, well, let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, I will redeem you. As the Lord lives, lie down until morning." And she lay at his feet until morning, and she rose before one could recognize his fellow, for he said, "Let it not be known that the woman who came to the threshing floor." And he said, ready the shawl you are wearing, and hold it." And she held it, and he measured out 6 barleys and placed them upon her, and she came to the city. And she came to her mother-in-law, and she said, "Who are you, my daughter?" And she told her all that the man had done to her. And she said, "He gave me these 6 barleys, for he said to me, 'Do not come empty-handed to your mother-in-law.' And she said, 'Sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will fall, for the man will not rest until he has resolved the matter today.'"
Very good. What do we have, people?
I have a question.
Sure.
If no one redeems her, what exactly does that mean? I know that she will not have a child. She will not remarry, as in her somewhat joining to Israel. What does that mean?
Her status won't really change. She won't. She will never be a full member of the society.
Even though her husband was
Correct.
before before he died. Okay.
Would her family be seen as outsiders since they left?
Yeah. Yeah. They would not have been. I mean, like the people that you have a son that runs away for 20 years and he comes back. He has a differentness about him. He has a lack of familiarity about him.
So how does the redemption of the kinsman work when she's not Jewish? I don't follow how that still works.
She's not Jewish, but she's accepted upon herself the God of Israel and the peoplehood, the covenant.
Okay, so just through that exception, then that the legality of the redeemer, kinsman redeemer, would take place.
Yeah. Yep.
What is winnowing? I look up here, French for chaff, I think it said something like that. Or what is winnowing?
Winnowing?
Yeah. Behold, he is winnowing the threshold floor.
I think it's something to do with carpet making
Oh, okay.
or making fabric, one of the two.
Okay.
It wouldn't be removing the wheat from the chaff?
No.
Thresh. Oh, okay.
Oh, go ahead. I didn't interrupt you. Sorry.
No, you didn't interrupt. No, you gave me my answer. You said no. It's interesting you said that even though she's not an Israelite, but because she takes it on herself, the commandments, then she's redeemed. So she wouldn't have been redeemed unless she had taken the commandments. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, as they would say. It's like, you know, um, I'm not entirely sure how to put it. It's like we knew you were, but it's like we knew you always is. It's like people who say, someone who converts to Judaism. Oh, you were always Jewish. You had a Jewish soul. It's almost like the same kind of language. It's like, oh well, you were a Jew, but
Yes and no. I don't buy into that idea that a convert was always Jewish. That's not a thing I really endorse. But in this time period, in this time frame, people could join this covenant with Israel and worship Israel's God, but they were still, to a certain degree, and we don't do this anymore, they were still somewhat outsiders. It's not like today where you convert and you're automatically a member of the people. Back then, you convert, you adjust your belief and your practices, and you start to integrate yourself. And it usually took multiple generations to integrate into the people. That's why she's still called Ruth the Moabitess. If you look at the great grandson of Boaz, who is David Amelech, King David, he has a good friend. This is the whole story about him and Bathsheba, right? Uriah the Hittite, Uriah the Hittite, who is a captain in the Israelite army. He obviously worships Hashem, the Jewish God, and he's part of this covenant, and he's a member, a quasi member of the people, but he's still called Uriah the Hittite.
So that would make sense. That means you would have to be redeemed. So that actually makes sense. It's like, okay, I joined the tribe. I'm quote unquote an Israelite, so to speak, but there's still like a haze, like a sort of unclarity to it. But then you get redeemed. It's almost like, oh, okay. It's like now the clarity is there. There's no more fuzziness about it.
Right. Correct. Well, it's in the Torah we see this language that until the third generation you shall not let them enter the congregation of the Lord. So third generation of what? The first generation is someone who joins the people. The second generation is someone who's raised in it. The third generation is considered like a full Israelite, born and raised in it. That's why Aaron asked earlier about Syrian Jews, how they have a ban on accepting converts. There is one condition. The Syrian Jewish community will accept the third generation grandchild of converts as Jewish, but they will not accept the first or second generation. They will allow Syrian Jews to marry people who are descendants of converts if it's at least 3 generations removed. And they do that justifying this type of language in the Bible.
Yeah, I can see that in a way. I can understand it. I mean, just because your conversion may or may not stick doesn't mean, your children won't. You know what I'm saying? Your children may grow up to be, God forbid, real horrible people. Obviously, that's not what we're trying to aim for. But I can see them. I mean, I'm not justifying it, but I can sort of understand where they're coming from. And nowadays we have interfaith marriages. That's a big thing now. We have people that are half Jewish and half Christian, and who knows what the kids are. I mean, you want to talk about not knowing what your identity is. I mean, what's the statistics? 80% of Reformed Jews marry Christians. I mean, it's just
Well, they marry out.
non-Jew. Yeah.
It's that could be a whole video discussion in and of itself. It's a very sad situation. It is, but it's a symptom. The intermarriage is not a root of anything. It's a symptom of something larger. But yes, yeah, I think it's in the 70 percentile in the Reform movement.
But I can understand. If you get to the third generation and you have like a real, I mean, you're real from and observant. It's like, yeah, those are like legitimate. That's a real thing. That's a real thing you have. It's beautiful.
Your father and your grandfather are steeped in it. You don't stick around for no reason. I mean, by that time you're in the thick of it. You're in. I was wondering on the redemption. Does this have anything to do, or does the Torah law that says that you marry your brother's wife if they have no children and he dies, and aren't you supposed to take her in? Is this have to do what's going on right now? The discussion that she and
that's something called yubum. That's if you yes, it is related, and this is kind of what's happening here. That's where if a woman is married and her husband dies, the husband's brother is obligated to marry her and have children with her to keep his lineage, to keep the dead husband's lineage and his name going alive.
And that's sort of what's happening here.
Odin.
That's exactly what's happening here.
Okay.
Right, Onan. Right, isn't that the?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
And he sees her with great favor. Was it her humility?
Whatever quality, I mean, she seems to be willing to do whatever she's asked. So she's been taken in as kind of like a family member to these people, this strange people in this strange land that she's never been to before. And she does, she's integrating herself really kind of rather marvelously. She's not sticking out like a sore thumb. She's not ducking behind the tool shed every evening to sacrifice a goat to, you know.
That's something.
Anything to it came to pass around midnight. Rashi says here, and he thought it was a demon and attempted to scream, but she held him and eloped him with her arms, and he was seized like Samson was seized in Judges chapter 16:29. And he placed his hands on her head and recognized it was a woman. I don't understand. So they're saying like, and the man quaked. So like he's having like a seizure. Is that what they're saying?
He awoke.
I don't.
And it scared him.
Oh, okay. It startled him. Okay.
Yeah, Boaz ate, drank, he laid down, and it came to pass. At midnight, the man quaked. He was shaking and was taken around, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. You wake up in the middle of the night, there's a woman at your feet. Okay, what is this? What's going on here? Startled him.
I do find that, and I didn't notice this until this evening, but I find it very interesting that at the time of Ruth, she was able to just show up basically and say, I want to be part of this, and they accept her. And then what is it, Hillel and Shemayim? It's like, they tell them a few things, so it's a little bit more stringent to the stage where we are at now, where it's, a year to many years, depending on who you are.
Right. Well, I mean, the year to many years thing is a development that, to be honest with you, really came to be in my lifetime. By the way, I'm 30. I'm not that old. When I was a kid, a typical conversion, like Orthodox conversion, took 6 months. It was not a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years like it is in many cases now.
But those 6 months for those who went through. I mean, a lot of times the people were still rejected, or
No, not at all.
You're not really allowed to reject a sincere convert, are you? I mean, there has to be like some serious.
No. So you ask when a convert comes to convert, you ask them why. You ask you try to flesh out their motives for us, and you let them know, like, look, this is some pretty serious stuff here. Your life is going to change. You can observe these 7 laws and be just fine. If you convert, you're liable for Shabbos, you're liable for Kashrus, you're liable for Yom Tov, you're liable for all these things that you're not liable for now. And you also inform them about, look, we're a hated and despised people. That joining us can be very dangerous. Things like that. But if they persist, if they say, look, I understand all that, and I still want to go through with this, and I'm, you accept them. You accept them immediately, and you do the conversion as soon as possible. You don't put it off for years and years and make them study and study and study and set the date back again and again and again, like is common now. You inform them of some minor commandments and some major commandments. You don't inform them This whole idea, I'm sure you've heard a rabbi say it 1,000 times. A convert has to accept every mitzvah in the Torah and everything before they convert. No, they have to accept the Torah. They have to accept Judaism as a system. They have to accept the yoke of the commandments, which is Judaism as a system. They have to accept and learn some minor commandments and some major commandments, and then you convert them. And then they learn as they go. At that point, you don't have to be basically a Talmud Chacham. You don't have to be a yeshiva scholar in order to convert. And that's why in the Talmud, conversion for males, because of the requirement of circumcision, you have to let someone heal after a circumcision before you immerse them in a mikvah. It took about a month. It was not this months and months, years and years process that people have made it into today. And obviously, with Ruth, circumcision is not an issue.
So you would pretty much agree that her conversion, that's $1 million question, right? When did Ruth convert, right? It's pretty much what you're saying. From what we're gathering here tonight, pretty much when she said, "Your Lord is my Lord, your people are my people." That was it. That's the answer to that question.
When she accepted the peoplehood and God, this covenantal relationship upon herself, that's when we say it happened. Whether or not there was mikvah at a later time, we don't know. There are commentaries that suggest so, but for all intents and purposes, the conversion is her display of intent. I will join you and your people will be my people, your God will be my God, and your people and your fate is bound up with mine. That's, for all intents and purposes, that's the conversion. That's the thing right here. That's why in Rambam, in the Mishnah Torah, in Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, when a potential convert, when a Gentile says, "I want to convert, I want to accept the Torah upon myself," even though he's not obligated in everything that the Torah prescribes for a Jew yet, even though he's not obligated, if he strays from that path, if he decides at some point, "I don't want to convert anymore," it's a huge tragedy. It's a very, very terrible thing, and he gets judged for that. So even before a formal conversion is taking place, when the intent is there and you start identifying with this group of people, that's the inward conversion as we understand it today with mikvah, circumcision. These are ritual requirements, but they're outward expressions of something that's already happened inside you.
That's a great way of expressing it. Yeah. It's a sign. These are signs and wonders throughout the Bible, that the Bible gives us themes. Put a mezuzah, wear tefillin, wear tzitzit, wear kippur. These are just a sign, an identification.
Right. The requirements of conversion, as we have them today, these are legal marking points for the change of status from a Gentile to a Jew. That's what they're for.
Isn't there a midrash that says that the Lord accepted Jethro the moment he said, "I see now the God of Israel is greater than all other gods"?
Yeah. Yep. That is in the midrash, yes.
Yeah, we did a study on that on the orphans of Abraham. Not to plug the channel, but God seemed to suggest that God rebuked Moses for not allowing him into the encampment. It seemed like he didn't allow him to encamp. I forget exactly what the Torah says. He camped outside the encampment or something, and he didn't let him in. And God rebuked Moses for that, and he should have let him in, and blah blah blah. But that's interesting. I think I would agree with that. I think once you know the truth, I think that's how God judges us. I think God judges, not to sound like whatever, but we're all on different levels. If you know that if you're on level 10, right, and you know that's where you're supposed to be, and you decide to go back to level 7, whatever label you call yourself, a Jew, non-Jew, Ger, Gersadic, Noahide, you know what I mean? It's like, I like that what you said, Rabbi. God's going to judge you for going back even before you convert. It's like, if you know Hashem is the one, and you know Torah's truth, and that should be it. That's why I get a little hard on Noahides a little bit, or Gerim folk, because it's like, yeah, come on, guy. It's almost like
It's easier for some, man. I'll take the Ger Toshav thing. I could take the status of a.
Not everybody is in a position to convert. Not everybody, for either family, circumstances or whatever the case may be. It's not always an option for everybody. It just isn't. It's just facts of life. But
I came to it wanting to convert, and it's still not. It's still Israel. My eye still strays to Israel, colloquially speaking.
Well, that's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
But I mean, what you just said, John, about everybody's at a different level, that's correct. And you're absolutely right. God does judge based on knowledge, based on the knowledge of the person being judged. We have this concept called a Tanuk Shanishba. Tanuk Shanishba, literally in Hebrew, it means a captive baby or a captive infant. If someone is born Jewish but is kidnapped by non-Jews, let's say a baby is born to a Jewish mother and is kidnapped by, I don't know, Mormons. Doesn't seem very likely, whatever. And is raised as a Mormon. That Jewish child is not liable for Shabbos, is not liable for idol worship, because it doesn't know better. It doesn't know, one, that it's obligated, and it doesn't know anything about these things. And that's through no fault of the child. That's why, and we say this also about Jews today who are raised in heterodox, non-observant movements like the Reform and Conservative or whatever. They're not liable for their sins. They're taught a fairy tale cookie cutter version of something. If Judaism is a house, these people are locked outside on the porch. It's a very unfortunate way to have to phrase it, but it's true. They've never seen the inside of the house.
Now the captive thing actually happened more than you would think. I mean, especially with Soviet Russia. I mean, I can't tell you the horror stories of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there weren't that many Catholics in Russia, but yeah, there were a lot of.
Well, the communists, the atheists, whatever you want to label them.
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%. Yes, believe me, I know. My parents are from there.
They kidnapped Jewish children, brainwash them. Yeah.
Well, they did a lot of worse things too.
Yeah.
But yes.
There was a story of a Palestinian terrorist who was it was a big thing a while back, years ago, and he was gonna kill a Jew or something, but the Jews started to pray the Shema, and he like he thought it was like a Muslim thing. It's like, what? She's saying the Shema, and they captured it and they said, well, my mother used to say the Shema. Because he didn't know he was captured. He was captured as a Muslim, and he was like raised, in Hamas or whatever it was, or I don't know. I mean, you hear it. I mean, this is just one story of many. I mean, we all know the stories.
Yeah, it's not as uncommon as you might think. There's a village just southeast of Jerusalem. It's between Jerusalem and Hebron. It's a very, very small Arab Palestinian village. You walk around the village, and I actually have pictures of these things I should show you sometimes. On some of the buildings, high up, I mean, the ones close to the ground have all been scratched off or they've been, plastered over, whatever. You'll see a Magen David. You'll see a Star of David on buildings. You'll also see these little indentations on the doorposts of these houses where a mezuzah used to be. It's not that this used to be a Jewish village populated by Jews and they kicked all the Jews out. That's not what happened here. What happened is all the Jews were forced to accept Islam in the late Ottoman period, and they secretly, for generations, still practiced Judaism in secret. And a number of them still do. Not all of them, but some of them still do. It's not that uncommon.
So would you say in some way or of another, because this is like sort of a Chabad thing, that a sort of being born Jewish, being born a Gentile, could be like a captive, like this sort of idea that the soul is captive within the body of the physicality, and you're sort of redeeming them by converting them.
No, I don't buy into that at all.
It's interesting because I see such good things from Chabad. It's like it's almost like they want it both ways. They want to be like sort of like pro Gentile, but in the same way they're like anti Gentile. It's weird. I don't really know how to explain it. It's like they want to have the cake and eat it too. It's kind of weird in a way, but it is what it is. You can't do nothing about it.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody want to read chapter 4? Or if it's what he wants, I can read chapter 4. I'll read chapter 4. And Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz had spoken was passing, and he said, "Turn aside, sit down here, so and so." And he turned around and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." And they sat down. And he said to the near kinsman, "Naomi, who has returned from the field of Moab, is selling the portion of the field that belonged to our brother, to Elimelech." And I said, "I will let you know," saying, "But it in the presence of those who sit here and before the elders of my people, if you will redeem, redeem, and if you will not redeem, tell me, and I will know, for there is no one besides you to redeem, and I am after you." And he said, "I will redeem." And Boaz said, "On the day that you will buy the field from the hand of Naomi and from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the deceased, you have bought it to preserve the name of the deceased on his heritage." And the near kinsman said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar my heritage. You redeem my redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem." Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redemption and exchange. To confirm anything, one would remove his shoe and give it to his fellow, and this was the attestation in Israel. And the near kinsman said to Boaz, "Buy it for yourself," and he removed his shoe. And Boaz said to the elders and to the entire people, "You are witnesses today that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion's and Machlon's from Naomi. And also Ruth the Moabitess, Machlon's wife, I have acquired for myself a wife, to preserve the name of the deceased on his heritage, so that the name of the deceased not be obliterated from his brethren and from the gate of his place. You are witnesses today." And all the people who were in the gate of the elders replied, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is entering your house like Rachel and like Leah, both of whom built up the house of Israel, and prosper in Ephrathah, and be famous in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, with the seed that the Lord will give you from this maiden." And Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he was intimate with her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord who did not deprive you of a redeemer today, and may his name be famous in Israel. And may he be to you a restorer of life and to sustain your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you bore him, and she is better to you than 7 sons." And Naomi took the child and placed him in her bosom, and she became his nurse. And the women neighbors gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi," and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Yishai, the father of David. And these are the generations of Perez. Perez begot Hezron, Hezron begot Ram, Ram begot Aminadab, and Aminadab begot Nahshon, and Nahshon begot Salma, and Salma begot Boaz, and Boaz begot Obed, and Obed begot Yishai, and Yishai begot David. Thus ends the Book of Ruth. Anybody? Anything? Okay. Guess not. Looks like John left us. Let's see if he comes back in a minute or so.
There's so much there, it's hard to pinpoint. So it's not that we're trying. Well, I'm not trying to be quiet to be rude. I'm just there's.
Oh, no. I never.
I've read that. I've read it many times, but it seems like, or had it read to me, and it's a lot of information, and it seems like you always get something new, and it's how to take it a lot of ways. So,
100%. Yeah. Aaron, James, have anything?
And I assume that this, with the barley harvest and all that, this is taking place around Shavuot as well.
No, that this would be in the fall. So maybe between like the high holidays and Sukkot, autumn.
Okay, so then I guess the tie to reading it is more just about the acceptance of the Torah as opposed to time frame.
Correct. Right. James is getting his kid out of the bath. I know what that's like.
Now, it certainly opened a couple of things learned here just this evening that opened my eyes to just, I mean, just the simple fact of just accepting things and how things have progressed, to where conversion is so discouraged in today's day and age.
Right. No, I agree.
And that specific relevance to, like, you can't hide from it. Because I think, maybe out of personal experience, there's been some hesitancy on things just because you see how much is entailed in being Jewish, and you just run, you kind of run and hide from that. So,
It's very daunting. I can understand that. If you're not someone who was raised in it, I can understand why it's very daunting. But it's important to understand, too, that not everything being sold as Judaism is obligatory. A lot of the customs that people are being forced into are not halacha. They're not obligatory. But, they're being sold to converts and potential converts as something that they have to keep. I mean, Judaism is tough. It is. It really is tough. It's tough without all the extra stuff. And that's why I'm part of this movement to kind of like cut out all the extra stuff that's not necessary. But unfortunately, I'm a minority. So.
like what exactly?
Well, a good example is, we just had Passover. You ever hear of Kitnius? You know what that is?
Something to do with the digestive system.
No. So for Pesach, for Passover, Ashkenazi Jews have a minhag. They have a custom not to eat kitnius. Kitnius are legumes, beans, that type of thing, rice. Whereas Sephardic Jews, they still eat these things. A lot of Ashkenazi Jews think that this is halacha, think that they have to refrain from eating kitnius during Pesach. It's a minhag. It's not halacha. It's not obligatory. And it's not ancient. It's less than 500 years old. I'm Ashkenazi. I was raised not eating kitnius for Pesach. As an adult, I eat kitnius. I eat what's not prohibited. The big problem is we're taking things that are not halacha, that we're taking things that are not legally binding, and we're turning them into things that we sell to people as legally binding, and it's off-putting, which is a problem. And a lot of times it's ignorance. A lot of times people don't even realize, hey, not everything here is binding. Not everything here has to be kept. So that's one example.
Speaking of getting down to brass tacks, you say that Dennis Prager's Rational Bible Genesis and Exodus are worth
They're
it.
excellent. They're excellent. They're for not being, most rabbis would probably not recommend something written by Dennis Prager, but they're excellent. They're absolutely on the philosophical level. I believe they're going to enhance a lot of people's relationship to the text. So I highly recommend them.
I do like Dennis Prager. I like his work.
Me too. Me too. Don't agree with everything, but I like him.
Now, why do we read Ruth around this time?
Because it's leading up to Shavuot, which is the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, and she accepted the Torah when she originally did not have to. She accepted the covenant upon herself. So that's the tie-in with Shavuot.
Much like the mixed multitude accepted at Sinai, or some of them.
Mm-hmm. Another example is the yarmulke. I think wearing a little hat is an obligation. It's a custom. It's something that a Torah scholar is supposed to keep their head covered at all times, for sure. In general, you're only obligated to keep your head covering when you're davening. This is why you'll see, like in New York, a lot of religious Jews, when they go to their day jobs as carpenters, as plumbers, or something like that, they'll take it off until they have to pray or say a blessing or something. Or they'll wear a hat instead.
I got a statement, I guess, is that, how things, I've heard this story said that, at dinner, on Thanksgiving, grandma always made this, and it came a custom, then it came oh yeah, in Torah or here or there, it says to do this, or in the Talmud, it says to do this. And so many years pass by, and people start to, some believe it, some don't believe it, and then all of a sudden everybody believes it. Okay, we do that. And I wonder how many things have done this. I wonder how many times things have gone over and over and over to where it was, okay, now instead of it's custom, now it's a commandment. It's this, it's that. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, it is. I'm actually part of something called the Minhag Project, which is we're trying to research, find, and label all of these customs and where they originated from. And we're going to eventually make this a smartphone app that people can look it up really quick. And if they have a question about something that they're being asked to observe, they can look it up real quick and they'll find out pretty much instantaneously, is this obligatory or is this optional? Do I have to do this or do I not have to do this? And I think that's going to be a big help in the long run for kind of getting the world back on track.
Oh, that is something else. That is a fantastic idea.
I don't see Judaism going along with you at all. I really don't.
It's me and maybe 4 other rabbis that are working on this right now. Some people are very, very wedded to their ideas. I used to be, not so much anymore. I mean, it's basically this movement. We call ourselves Mikorim, or um, the Makori movement. It exists almost exclusively in Israel. It doesn't really exist in America or Canada, anything like that. France, Russia. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get back to Judaism as it existed before exile and dispersion. What was obligatory? What is obligatory? What is a Jew obligated to keep? And what is optional? The thing is, over 2,000 years of exile, we've let so much extra stuff creep on and creep on. It's like dust on a light bulb. You got to buff that thing every once in a while and get the actual light to shine through.
I like that. Absolutely.
So how dissimilar is that from like modern Orthodoxy?
No, it really kind of depends on what you mean by modern Orthodoxy. I mean, modern Orthodoxy has, I'd say, like the modern Orthodox movement is much less problematic than, say, the Hasidic philosophy. Much less problematic than that. It really depends. Like, I consider myself to be modern Orthodox. There are certain things. Again, I don't eat kitten. I don't keep the restriction on kitnius for Pesach. It's I do Hishtawiyah, which almost no one does anymore. I mean, I'd be seriously surprised if there are 100 Jews on the planet that do that anymore.
What is Hishtawiyah?
Hishtawiyah is traditionally okay. So you know how Muslims, when they pray, they get out a little rug and they actually go all the way down on the ground, bowing.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't invent that. They got that from us, and then after they started doing it, we stopped.
Oh.
Didn't they do this?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, didn't they do the same thing with the woman's head wrappings?
Yeah. So you'll hear it all the time. You hear this all the time. Only a married woman is obligated to cover her hair, right? No. Any woman past puberty is obligated to cover her hair and the back of her neck. Jewish women used to wear something in the Middle East. It was called a radid. It looks pretty much almost identical to a hijab, the Islamic hijab. Even in Europe, unmarried Jewish women kept their heads covered up until about 100 years ago, and then it stopped. So there's that.
Yeah, I wonder how long ago they didn't actually go back so many hundred years and they didn't cover their head.
What do you mean?
Well, they started covering their head at one time, and then there's a possible that they didn't cover their hair at one time. I mean, if you read that in the Torah, you don't really hear women covering their head. I mean, it didn't really say.
Right. No, it doesn't really say. I mean, everything we know from sources, I'd say like the first century BCE, they were by that time, so at least 2,100 years.
So that might just been a custom, or
Well, no, it's halakha. That's an actual commandment. We actually have the Sanhedrin actually ruled on that, so that's binding. But
so I always like that Sanhedrin actually makes the laws of God. I always find that interesting.
well, no, they
I know.
adjudicate the laws of God.
They what?
They adjudicate.
It just scares me. It starts to sound like Catholic. The Pope. That scares me. That has always scared me.
But God set up, do the trust.
It's not like the Pope at all, though. I mean, these people know that they're not infallible. I mean, there's a whole list. There's a whole book. There's a whole tractate of Talmud called Horerot, where it actually discusses the mistakes they made.
Well, the thing is they got cast out of Israel, and they had the Sanhedrin, there. Evidently, they didn't do too good, or nobody was listening.
People were disobedient. Yeah.
Yeah, but they didn't really speak about them a whole lot. I
What,
didn't, I never read, them talking about them a whole lot. I'm not being a smartass, but I'm just,
They don't talk about who.
the Sanhedrin, the judges. They don't speak about them. They speak about Isaiah or Jeremiah or whoever. They're not going to the Sanhedrin saying, "Hey guys, y'all need to get your people straightened out."
that's
They're going to
exactly
the
what,
prophets.
that's what the whole purpose of the. It's like a Supreme Court.
It just a little scary. To me, it seems like a lot of authority there that's been given, and there's really not a whole lot said about it, and it doesn't speak about the authority.
Yes, it does, in a number of different places, in both the prophets and in the
I've
Torah. It talks about.
I've read the places, and there's kind of thin. It's like matzah. I'm not going to get an argument. I'm not trying to get an argument with you. Just
Well, God said that you have to follow the judgments of the courts. That was a commandment in Torah. That's a Torah commandment written, spelled out plain as day. So we have to, I guess you have to take it on faith to some extent, but you've always got the Torah to let you know when they're screwing up. It's always there.
yeah, but it says not to add to the Torah
Right.
or take away from the Torah. They didn't say adding no
Adjudicate.
one can add to the Torah or
Right.
take from the Torah.
Right. But you have to
And if
adjudicate those laws.
huh?
You have to adjudicate those laws. They have to be it has to be a living, breathing document that's functional in society.
Absolutely.
These guys are handling divorces, they're handling theft, and this dude beat up this dude, says I stole his ox or whatever,
Right.
It's that's what it means. It's not like they're adding to or taking away.
No, the point I'm making, there's places where I could see that. And then there's also places where they explain things that did not need to be explained. There's places where they didn't need to be changed, but they decided to change it anyway. So what was more important? Adding to the Torah, as in writing it down, or adding to the Torah on how to do it, but doing it wrong? And I say wrong because a man decided to tell you this is the way it's going to be. And he may be right, he may be wrong. So to me, and then you look at Israel and you say, the rest of the world, if you believe in this in Judaism, you will do it this way. That's scary to me. To me that's scary when you force somebody to do it the wrong way. That's religion. You do it your way. Don't do it what if the prophet told you, God told you to tell you to do this way. No, I'm telling you to do it this way. To me, it's scary.
So, do you have a problem with Hanukkah or Purim? Because neither one are commanded
You
by
mean
God.
exactly, and it had its lies as well. The all that lasted, for 7 days. Uh, it had its deceptions.
How do
Yeah,
you know it's a deception?
excuse me.
How do you know it's a deception?
That the all lasted for 7 days.
8 days, but yeah.
Oh, 8 days. Okay, my fault. How do I know?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know it didn't, or how you know it did?
I don't, but I have no reason.
Okay,
I have no reason to suspect that it didn't either. I have no reason to suspect that the party with the Red Sea didn't happen either.
right. Okay, you're getting upset and you're getting defensive. I understand, and I'm
No,
not
no, I'm
trying
not.
to.
I'm not.
Yeah, a little bit, maybe just a little. And I understand that you're going to protect what you believe, and I understand that. But I have I respect uh, the belief I believe that Judaism, unfortunately, has turned into a religion in a lot of ways,
When it
and it's
was on Mount Sinai, it was a religion. When it was handed to Moses, it was a religion.
no, that was religion is man-made. Man-made. What I mean is that he put man put his hands on it, and I understand it was given to man, and I understand that, and to an extent, you're right, but and to another extent is that you can even go back so far when you read into Judaism that they had evil eye and evil spirits. They would put stones on things to keep the devil or
Okay.
the bodies from
And
lifting up. I mean, there was many things that was a part of Judaism
Sure.
that right.
It's happened, but uh, I,
You see
I,
my point? When you can add things like that,
I,
then
but
how
that's
many other things have come through as well? You
well,
see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but believing in demons and the evil eye stuff is not obligatory. It's not even written anywhere. It's folk custom. It was never universally accepted.
Well, you have things that you're saying right now that you're standing up against people not eating beans on Pesach or whatever. It's, and these are little things. How many big things are there? That's my point. Is
the
that if
conversion.
people would go,
Look at
huh?
the conversion process. There's a perfect example. And Gav was talking about Kabbalah too. I have a question, but I don't know if I wanted to bring it up on the live portion. But he was, how conversion was a 6-month thing, and it was about becoming a part of the tribe, if you will, a member of the tribe, or you're joining a nation. And then that suddenly, and now we have people saying that it's now it's turned into something it wasn't ever supposed to be. But we still have a connection. We still have the Torah, so we can fine tune. We can get rid of that. We can get rid of the Jush. That's what Gav was saying. There is a lot of dust on the bulb that needs some. It happens. It's human. But I mean, thank God, Baruch Hashem, we've got the Torah. We've got.
Yeah, but do we study the Torah or do
I,
we study the Talmud?
both.
Judaism.
I like it all, but
I understand. I read the Torah.
Torah first. Yeah, Torah first.
Okay, but what I see, synagogues, they read the Torah. I mean, the Talmud. People are reading the Talmud,
There's a time
the
for
prayer books.
Well, there's a time for study, scholarly study, and lawyer stuff when it comes to law, and then there's a time that we read Ruth, or there's a
I
time.
understand.
That,
Yeah, but I see they're reading Ruth once a year.
well, you can read it any time. It's a tradition.
But they do what Judaism tells them to do. They read the Parsha once a week. That's it. And the rest of the time they're a part of this gang called Judaism, and they're doing their prayer books. I'm just saying is that it's sad to see the Judaism, or Jews get away from Torah and stay with other things then.
We're not getting away from Torah. We're keeping it.
Okay.
We're the
Yeah.
only group of people actually keeping it.
You're keeping the
Nobody
Talmud.
else has come close. You gotta admit. I mean,
No, I understand. No, I understand that. But God also says that if I'd have gave this to the Gentiles, what'd they say? They'd have changed. So we're trying to catch up with you guys. We're trying to follow y'all and to know God. But y'all are understanding the Talmud and what men have said more about that than what you did about God.
No, absolutely false.
You
No,
think? So everybody's going back to Israel now, huh?
no, not everybody's going back to Israel. Not every Jew is religious.
Don't get excited, man. I'm not. I'm talking
Wade,
to you.
With all due respect, Wade, you're the one that.
Okay, I can only take on one at a time. I can't take on a bunch of people.
Yeah,
I
well,
wasn't gonna get in.
Oh, solve that.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there and just say, Wade, you're the one that's throwing a throwing a lot of aggression out there. So
I don't like ejecting people, but there's a reason why the Talmud says you prioritize Torah.
yeah, unfortunately, there's a particular slant that some people have, and they don't want to take the time to be quiet long enough to listen to what's really going on. And
Well, he's coming at this whole problem. He still has recycled Christian BS in his mind, the sola scripture stuff. If he had ever, for a day of his life, actually tried to living according to the Torah, he'd realize that you cannot do it without a Talmud, without an explanation of how to keep the commandments. It is not possible. That's why even the Karaites, which is the sect that broke away in the 8th century, that rejected, quote unquote, the rabbis, and they just stuck with, the written Bible or whatever. Guess what? They had to invent their own oral law. They actually have a book of interpretations and customs. The Egyptian community did anyway. It's not possible to live Torah without it. And for some reason, the only people who seem to know that are people who actually keep it.
no, 100%. I mean, that's in my path. I went through this Hebrew roots kind of thing, and how I ended up getting to the place where I am now, where me and my whole family are taking care of some property issues and things like that so we can move into an Orthodox community, is by doing that, because we all sat together and tried to observe the Torah, and there is no way that you can do it just with the one book. So I feel sorry for some of the people out there that have been given a particular slant, and I hope that they can move past it. But sometimes they just need to be ejected.
The prophets mention practices and that you should keep them as commandments of God that were never mentioned in Torah. Not carrying money, not carrying anything outside the city. There are holidays that were added by prophets who sat on the Sanhedrin.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But I do like the work that you're doing in regards to clarifying the minhag versus what the halakha is. Um, in my short stint, they don't seem to make a clear distinction. You really have to dig to find that distinction. They, I hear the distinction between this is derisa and this is the rabbanan, but then you don't hear, but this is the minhagim or whatever it would be.
Right. It's because a lot of people don't even know. Which is the unfortunate part.
Doesn't you mentioned prostrating? Doesn't the Rambam mention prostrating like fully?
Oh, it's in the prophets. The prophets mention it. The Rambam does. The Talmud does. The Ramah, who lived in like the 15th century in Europe, mentions it. So up until about 500 years ago, even in Europe, there were still Jews who were doing it, evidently.
I assume this is something that you do at home and not in the shul, where, especially in a packed shul.
I'm sorry, that broke up. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I was to say, I assume this is a practice, at least nowadays, that you would do in your home when you're not in the shul.
Well, one time it was done in synagogues too. Yeah, if you would have gone into like a synagogue in Baghdad in like the 10th century, there would have been no seats to sit on. It would have just been like an open hall facing one direction.
Sorry to take off, y'all. I had to get a bedtime snack, and somebody was getting in the kitchen, so I had to leave a hurry.
No problem. How was bath time?
Oh, it was fine. Someone was very energetic. And go right ahead. Go right ahead. And my oldest has been under the weather, so she's been kind of sleeping a lot of the day. So it's been Katie having ransackability of the house. She has the whole thing to herself, all the toys, everything, and she's just loving it. So, but yeah, bath time was fun.
Yeah, my kids enjoy it too. And of course, my dog, who seems to want to join every time.
Wow.
I have to close the bathroom. They're like, no, Loki, this bath is for Hadassah. This is not for you. Get out.
So I got to ask you a question. Was the diagram that we see, the tree of life, was that a Middle East invention as well, or does that have ties to something else? Or not Middle East, the medieval era.
Like the Kabbalistic tree of life?
Right, with the Sephiroth and the
right. No, that's Middle Ages stuff.
No kidding.
No kidding.
I find it honestly, the more I think about it, I find it more like Taoism. It's like Taoism is like everything Kabbalah says simplified and made, and it's not even, I don't know. Seems like an elaboration of something very simple. Has there ever been, okay. Did they take a practice or a thought process, a conversation? I don't want to say mystical, that's not the word, but was there ever any sort of school like that and that became a perversion of it? Or was this something kind of popped up out of nowhere?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So does Kabbalah, authentic Jewish mysticism, exist? No. Did it exist at one time? Yes. Is what we have today in the form of the Zohar, Sefer HaBahir, Sefer Yetzirah, Hasidus, all these other little texts and books, is that authentic Jewish mysticism? Is that the stuff that's mentioned by Rabbi Akiva, things like that? Absolutely not. How do we know? In the Talmud, it talks about this mysticism. It doesn't explain it. It tells you what it was called. To an extent, there was a certain title they used for it. It does not explain what its central ideas were. It explains that very few people were allowed to learn it. Most people were not mature enough to learn it. And that knowledge of it died after the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 2nd century. There weren't enough people who knew about it to keep it alive, so it died out. We no longer have this. We don't hear anything about mysticism. Again, I mean, we know it existed. We know that there were people that kept strange, spooky little practices. We find a mention like the Sadia Gaon in the 7th century mentions that there are people that keep foolish superstitions and that these are non-Jewish beliefs and only ignorant people keep them. Things like that. Maimonides, Rambam, he decides like, look, authentic. And in his time, there was clearly, we don't know a whole lot about it, but there was clearly a conflict between people like him who were rationalists and people who were mystical, who had mystical leanings. He writes about that a little bit, and he says very clearly in More Nevuchim that authentic Kabbalah was never written down, and that by by his time, meaning the 11th century, it had been lost. No one knew it. No one knew anything about it. And then we have, in the 14th century, we have the Zohar comes to light in Spain, things like that. And that really kind of kicked off the whole modern day creeping of Kabbalah into Judaism.
I think one of the greater appeals I found to Judaism, because Kabbalah was the thing, but I was all into mysticism anyway. But when it grabbed hold of me, it seemed there was a very psychological nature to it. I don't mean that in a wrong way, but it does address a lot of the human condition. Even studying it, I think, changes the human condition. There is something non-corporeal about the effect it has on, you know what I'm saying? There's something to it. I'm not saying there's something to Kabbalah, but I do think there is I don't know if you call it, is there a word for it? Is there a kosher word for it in Judaism?
For what exactly?
Looking inward to Torah, finding
out, trying to understand like the deeper hidden
meaning of life, or the Torah being a template in which the glass I look through, or the lens I would look through, if you will, to look at myself. Self-development even is what I mean.
Yeah, I mean that's heshbon hanefesh. That's making an accounting for your soul. That's what you do every high holidays between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. What have I done wrong? What do I need to do? What I need to change in my life? That type of thing. But as far as here's what Torah says about hidden things and hidden meanings. Don't worry about them. The hidden things are for Hashem, and the revealed things are for you to do all the commands of this Torah. That's what your focus is supposed to be on. Stop worrying about things that are hidden. Stop trying to find the hidden meaning in things.
But the inner struggle that is very recognized.
Oh,
that psychological, what I'm saying, the mental maybe is what I'm saying. The East would call it spiritual, in the fact that that part of your brain that has an imagination that might even lure you away. That struggle, that's blatantly recognized in Judaism. That a lot of people would call that spiritual. That's what I get when I talk to people, is the spiritual thing, I think, is an expression of an inner struggle, and they don't recognize it, and it's always a war thing, and in Torah it's just, are you going toward the light or are you going toward the darkness? It's really laid out blatantly. I think it's a better dichotomy than when people see the inner struggle, and you just said it's taking accounting of your soul. It's practical, but it affects you on such a level. I don't know what word I don't know if there's a word I'm trying to use for it to translate because I've had a couple conversations. I even met a guy who said half his family was Jewish, but they're off the derrick, very secular, very atheist. And
oh yeah.
I
live in Ramat Gan. It's basically the hooker central of Israel. You want to find Jewish prostitutes, come on down to my neck of the woods.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it's disappointing. But it is what it is. So
do all these books like Sefer Yetzirah and the Zohar and all that, do they fall into after this died out?
Way after. Well, the thing is, the Zohar claims internally that it was written by Shimon Bar Yochai, who was a famous 2nd century sage that we know quite a lot about from the Talmud, actually, that he wrote it while he was hiding out in a cave with his son from the Romans. Very interesting that a book written in a cave in 2nd century Judea would turn up 13 centuries later in Christian Spain, and that a random rabbi named Moses de Leon would find it, quote unquote. It's also very interesting that a book written in 2nd century Judea, mostly in Aramaic, would also have some Spanish words and grammar in it.
Ooh.
Spanish was not a language in the 2nd century. It hadn't evolved into a language yet.
No.
Especially not Castilian or what we call Middle Age High Spanish did not exist yet.
Right.
And so it kind of gives itself this authority because the Zohar, by the way, the Zohar is not one book. You can't go to the library like, yeah, I'll have a copy of the Zohar. It's a massive multi-volume writing. This was not written by one guy in a cave, okay? There's no way. And it's unthinkable that something could be hidden since the 2nd century in one part of the world and then just be discovered by some guy in Spain.
In Spain.
13 centuries later. I don't know what his motivation was. I'm not trying to sully the name of Rabbi Moses de Leon. That was the rabbi that found it. But, after he died, his wife even came out and admitted that he wrote it. I have no idea what his motivation was. Again, if you look historically, early on, the Zohar is almost universally accepted in Orthodoxy today. There are people who unfortunately take it literally. Thankfully, they're a minority. Most people take it as like a midrash, like an allegory type of thing, which that presents its own problems, but it's not as bad as taking it literally. The Hassam Sofer, very, very famous sage, lived in Hungary. Very, very strict. He's basically the founder of the philosophy that we would recognize today as Haredi Judaism, this ultra strict, going above and beyond what the law requires to be strict. He rejected the Zohar. He said it's nonsense. He never wrote it. Rabbi Yaakov Emden, another very famous European sage, said that maybe 1 or 2 pages may have came from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's ideas, but he didn't write it. It's not real. Most Jews worldwide rejected this until about 150, 200 years ago, and then it gained popularity. And that was in part thanks to the Hasidic movement.
It seems like the whole knowledge and or use for it depleted because you were no law, because no one was in the land. No one was in the land anymore. Everyone was dispersed. You leave the land, you lose the. You don't need it anymore. Where's the miracle? Where's the need for the tunic? And the breastplate. What good is any of that? It seems like. When you say that was lost in like the first century, that's a long time. That's a long time.
A very long time.
And I don't see the need for because I personally believe, I don't know if I'm right or not. I believe the utensils, everything described in Leviticus that we've been reading, and I think everything has I don't want to say it's scientific, but I think copper on I think there's a system to it. I really do.
Of course, there's a system to it. But here's the problem. Because of this emphasis on Kabbalah, so many people, the system is inverted. Okay? It says in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, you're supposed to study Torah. Torah is supposed to be your foundation. The 5 books of Moses, you study that. That's your primary thing. Then after that, you study Mikra. Mikra is the other books of the Bible, the prophets, the writings, things like that. Then you study Mishnah, the actual recorded oral law. Then you study the Gemara, which is the Talmud, which is the commentary on it. And that's the level of education. You start with Torah, you move on to the rest of the Bible, to the oral law, and to the Talmudic commentaries on that oral law. People today are starting not with the foundation. They're building. They're starting with the roof. They're like, teach me Kabbalah. You notice, the Shulchan Aruch, which is a codification of Jewish law, was also written in Spain by Rav Yosef Karo. This is a man that believed in Kabbalah. He wrote that even in the Shulchan Aruch that a person should not study Kabbalah unless he's at least 40 years old, is married, has children, and has a firm knowledge of Torah, the Bible, and the oral law. Only then should he be allowed to study Kabbalah, which, according to Yosef Karo, that would be the Zohar, Sefer HaBahir, Sefer Yitzhak, things like that. This was never meant to be authentic Kabbalah, even way before that. In the first century, thing was never meant to be taught to the masses. It was never meant to be a thing, and it was not considered essential. You did not have to know it to be a good Jew or to be Torah observant. In fact, even in the Talmud, when there was authentic Kabbalah, authentic mysticism, it warns against it for the most part. It takes an exceptionally rare individual that can learn this and not either become a heretic or go crazy.
Which I hear happened.
Yeah, Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya became a heretic because of this.
And I hear people have gone insane.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's when you're studying things primarily that don't relate to your everyday life, when it's just knowledge or purported knowledge, not even confirmed knowledge, it's just something that claims to be knowledge of an otherworldly working of how the metaphysical works. Your mind is constantly locked in abstraction. You're not studying anything practical. You're not studying how to put on tefillin. You're not studying how to build a good sukkah, how to build, things like that. You're not learning how to live your everyday life according to Torah. You're learning about all of this spooky stuff that you can't see. That's a recipe for insanity if I ever heard one. What if someone sat you down in a room and for 40 years you're only allowed to study ghost stories? You'll go nuts and you'll think there's ghosts everywhere. It's the same thing that happens. That's why these big, they're called Mekubalim, these big Kabbalists in Israel, they're very strange people. They're very different. And that's why they have this kind of otherworldly aura around them. People are like, oh, wow, he's very in tune with the divine. No, this man is insane. Okay, this is not something to admire. This is something we pity. Okay, this man has studied these things. This man believes things that makes no sense, and he has no idea how to relate to reality anymore.
Has there ever been a physical representation made of Jacob's ladder or the steps?
And like in paintings and like artwork, sure.
I hear the one of the claims that's been made is that diagram was essentially what I've heard that claim made. And it makes no sense when I think about it. But yeah, the whole tree of life diagram was what Jacob saw in his vision, in his dream. It just seemed interesting. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the original Kabbalah, it's called Maseh Merkava, knowledge of the Merkava, of the chariot, or the divine chariot.
Oh,
That's what it's called it's basically it's an explanation of a lot of the concepts mentioned in the first chapter of Ezekiel, in the first couple verses there. Much beyond that, we don't know anything about it. Because, again, the people that knew anything about it have been dead for centuries. They're gone. This is not knowledge that we expect to regain.
like I said, necessity, isn't it? Is it true there were no miracles at the second temple? At least like there were at the first?
Right after the last prophets died and Shimon HaTzadik, the last righteous high priest, died. Yes, there were no visual anything you could see that was supernatural. What a very sad thing that must have been.
Didn't mean to duck out. No question.
No problem. No problem at all.
It makes perfectly good sense to me. And I've had people try to tell me, Kabbalah this, Kabbalah that, and it doesn't sit with me anything more than just like fictional, motivational, type stuff. But then people will tell me, oh, well, here's some practical Kabbalah. And what they try to explain to me is practical Kabbalah. It doesn't seem to be really that practical.
Right. No, and Rambam also wrote against that, practical Kabbalah, like this idea that, if you say certain phrases in Hebrew that it'll affect certain things, or if it'll ward off evil spirits. Rambam writes that people who get kosher Torah scrolls for their mezuzahs on their doorstones, if they do that because they think it's warding off evil spirits, they're committing avodah zarah, and it doesn't count as a mitzvah that they do this thing. It counts as a sin if they think that's what it's for. It's a very big practical Kabbalah is nonsense. I've seen people. I've gone to. I can't begin to tell you how many gatherings where a Kabbalist was supposed to be performing miracles. It's all smoke and mirrors. Like, oh, that's cool. I know a magician too. Want a rabbit? No, it's absolutely. I actually, and this is where I would actually agree with Wade. This is stuff that has crept in. But here's the thing: Kabbalah, as we understand it today, is not in the Talmud. It's not obligatory. The Sanhedrin never approved it. These are nonsense, non-obligatory beliefs that we should get rid of. I would agree with Wade on that. But that has nothing to do with Judaism as we understand it. That's Judaism as things have crept in. This is why I'm a part of this Minhag project, to try and figure out which ones are authentic and which ones we can do away with, or at least we're allowed to do away with. But practical Kabbalah, this idea that by doing certain things that we can cast spells and all that stuff. Yeah, I mock people who believe in it. I call it judo.
Yeah, I've heard that.
That's basically what it is.
That's that one, yeah. Evil spirits and stuff don't jibe at all with anything ever in Torah. I can't think of anything ever. Don't talk to the dead. Period. End of story.
Yeah, don't use a line from the Zohar to justify talking to the dead and praying to the dead and things like that. And a lot of people don't know this. They don't know that this stuff is. I mean, the Zohar, if taken literally, if you actually believe the Zohar is literally true, that means that you believe God is a giant man in the sky with parts. Okay? There are ramifications to believing these things are true. There are very serious ramifications.
It was a nice idea. I like the idea of wisdom descending into the world. Heaven is above you.
Sure, just make sure the wisdom actually comes from heaven.
Well, I can say this: when people say Kabbalah, I look at it. Okay, there's I love the story about the guy, the tourist who goes to Israel, and goes to the tourist shop and buys a tourist knick-knack, tchotchke, whatever, and the teller goes, "Here's your Kabbalah," and the guy goes back to in the United States thinking he has a sacred document. It's a joke, but.
Right.
But if you want to look at it one way, I honestly think there is a Kabbalah to learning the law. I think there is. I think that you receive wisdom by doing a holy thing and by learning these texts. And I think that you receive that. It's just not going to come out of clouds, and it's not going to be it's not going to be what you're expecting. I promise. But if I think you receive wisdom. I do believe in that. I do believe there is something. I don't want to say magical. If I were talking to, a bunch of Disney kids, maybe I could say that. But there is something
unexplainable.
Yeah.
Sure. It's a book full of unexplainable things. Things that are very explainable, things that are not very explainable.
Well, the effect it has that it's had on me. It's like I don't need any of the mysticism. I'm getting the wisdom from this, and sometimes it slaps me upside the head. I get it. And then when I go out into the world and I started saying a bride, I stopped being afraid to say a bracha in public when I eat, even with my family. So I was very insular about that sort of thing. I could tell a change in me, and just and the more I did, and the more and wisdom comes to that. I mean. It's going to come to you if you're looking for the Kabbalah stuff and you're out there listening live. I do believe that honestly, studying Torah and keeping the precepts, what you can, what you're supposed to, it can have a profound effect, and you don't need diagrams and stuff. It's my personal take. There's my 2 cents, my soapbox. I'm done now.
No, you're fine. You're absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think that the Kabbalah is one of the things for me and my family that showed as a deficiency because I didn't follow it. I'm not following the diagrams. I'm not seeing how I'm supposed to relate this to Torah and how I'm supposed to relate this to God, and just seemed like a massive deficiency that I had that I couldn't connect to. But thankfully, I've learned over time that it's not anything I have to connect to on that kind of a level. That it's just, it can be neat and people can talk about it, and that's great. But I don't have to have like a deep personal connection to Kabbalah to continue where I want to go.
Right. And that's how it should be. Not everybody agrees, of course. There are certain people whose opinions I respect but disagree with. They'll tell you that if you reject Kabbalah, you're rejecting Judaism, and that's heresy. I do not agree with this. At best, on a best case scenario, taken as a literary commentary, a non-literal commentary, at best it's optional. When Rav Yosef Kafe came from Yemen to Eretz Israel in the last century, a lot of the Yemenite Jews that came, they rejected the Zohar. They rejected Kabbalah completely. The traditional Yemenite community did. And when they arrived, they were badly persecuted by some of the other religious Jews, specifically for that belief. This is in the 1950s. And Rav, later in life, I'm sure you've heard of Rav Ovadia Yosef. He was the head Sephardic rabbi for the state of Israel. He said that, well, I don't agree with these people's beliefs. They're not doing anything wrong by rejecting the Zohar or rejecting Kabbalah. I don't agree with it. I don't think we should reject these things, but they're not heretics. You should not treat them as heretics. Leave them alone. And that's how it really should be. But to the extent that it's accepted as obligatory by some segments of the Torah world, it's very destructive. Because there are rabbis that paskin, they make halakhic rulings based on these ideas, and it becomes, to the people that follow those individual rabbis, it becomes an obligation. It becomes, and that's a problem. That's a very big problem.
Yeah, I'm glad you just said that because that gives me even more to keep my eye on.
If I could recommend a book by Rabbi Moshe Ben Chaim, it's called Judaism, Religion of Reason. Everyone should read it. It's a beautiful book. It explains a lot of why these issues are a problem. And he has a beautiful website too, Masora.com or .org, one of the two, I can't remember. There's articles about this stuff. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, Masora.
Yeah, thank you. I'll certainly look into that.
I'll post a link to his website here. And there it is.
Yeah. Realizing the error of fabricated religions, engaging proof and reason. Abraham discovered God in his true religion, Judaism. Well, it's brilliant. I'm hooked. I'm a satisfied customer.
Oh, good. And he puts out I believe, a monthly magazine that's available for download on his website. It's perfectly free. You can also order his books on the website there too. It's really, in this day and age, he is a gem, a real gem, because you don't find many rabbis talking about this stuff. He's one of maybe 5 or 6 I can think of.
I've often said that if there's any religion an atheist would want to follow, it would be Judaism in the end. And I've had a lot of atheists actually agree with me. They'll give me 1,000 reasons why they won't, but they'll start out with, well, yeah, if there's any one, yeah. Like, see, huh? Atheist approved. Now they want to, they favor themselves rationalists. Well, you know, I got to tell you, the rabbis talk a lot more rational stuff about this. And they got in discussions online and forums, and someone will ask a question, and I'll just kind of feel, why not? I just, give them a very, very, very rabbinical answer, something the Rambam said, or whatever. And then other people will start chiming in, and some of the I forget how far out a lot of people go on this stuff. I really do. Not in Judaism, just biblical folk, Christians and whatnot. There's I forget just how far out one can get with this. And it's not where you need to be. Come near, not far. All right, I'm going to have to actually bid you adieu because I'm going to put my girls to bed. And they need to go. And that's going to be an undertaking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's always fun. This is the part where you sleep. All of a sudden, all they want to do all day is nap until it's actually time to sleep.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to hopefully get some wiggles out and chase them around the house for a bit. And we'll see how things go. Thanks for the class. Thanks for the read. That was great.
No problem. This is a good time to end the live feed. So thanks, everybody, for watching.
Shalom.
Shalom.